Welcome back to the show, my friend. My name is Victor Nieves. You're listening to the Victor Nieves Show, and as much as I would like to talk about basically anything else, we're going to be talking once again about the Iran war, which is not a war, 2 more weeks to slow the spread or something like that. We've had some massive developments. Joe Kent has resigned, shaking the entire political world. We now have an announcement. Apparently, he was under some sort of an investigation. A lot of questions surrounding all of this. Mark Levin has been declared MAGA, kind of like the flag bearer of MAGA, which is really weird considering he was one of the people that was a never Trumper. We're going to talk a little bit about that. The shakedown inside of the administration, there seems to be, in my analysis, there seems to be a little bit of a divide happening right now among certain people within the administration, some calculated distancing that's on display that many people have maybe not picked up on. But before we jump into that, and so much more today, as always, I want to start off the best way that I know how, taking a minute in these crazy, trying, troubling times to thank my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, for all of the blessings that I have not earned and I certainly do not deserve, but I'm very grateful for. Politicians, political pundits, myself, every human being that's walking the face of this earth right now will eventually let you down. And I hope and I pray that you don't put your faith in them, that you understand that they're human beings, and that, yes, they will make mistakes, they will mess up. The only one that you can really build your life on, the foundation that'll never be rocked, is that of Jesus Christ. So as we enter into the uncertain future of Lord only knows what's coming down the pipe, I encourage you to accept Jesus Christ. Now, let's jump in with the biggest story, the most important thing that's happening right now. And this is an ongoing, developing case. So by the time you hear this, give me some grace. It could be that some stuff has developed and some things have changed. But as I record this, Joe Kent has resigned. And if you're not familiar with who Joe Kent is, he was the director of National Counterterrorism Center. So he worked under Tulsi Gabbard, a significant position. It's not one that you see on the news all of the time, but this is a pretty significant guy. I want to read you his letter, because this has understandably shaken an awful lot of people. I think right now on Twitter, it's on the verge of 100 million views. So this is not just not a little flash in the pan kind of a thing. This is going to be a pretty big development as time goes on. Mr. Kent posted on social media, he posted this basically everywhere, a letter addressed to President Trump. I'd like to just read it at the start of the show. He says, "President Trump, after much reflection, I have decided to resign from my position as director of the National Counterterrorism Center effective today. I cannot, in good conscience, support the ongoing war in Iran. Iran, he says, posed no imminent threat to our nation. It is clear that we started this war due to pressure from Israel and its powerful American lobby. I support the values and the foreign policies that you campaigned on in 2016. 2020 and 2024, which you enacted in your first term. Until June of 2025, you understood that the wars in the Middle East were a trap that robbed America of the precious lives of our patriots and depleted the wealth and posterity of our nation. In your first administration, you understood better than any modern president how to decisively apply military power without getting us drawn into never-ending wars. You demonstrated this by killing Soleimani and defeating ISIS. Early in this administration, high-ranking Israeli officials and influential members of the American media deployed a misinformation campaign that wholly undermined your America First platform and sowed pro-war sentiments to encourage a war with Iran. This echo chamber was used to deceive you into believing that Iran posed an imminent threat to the United States and that should you strike now, there was a clear path to a swift victory. This was a lie and is the same tactic the Israelis used to draw us into the disastrous Iraq war that cost our nation the lives of thousands of our best men and women. We cannot make this mistake again. As a veteran who deployed to combat 11 times, and as a Gold Star husband who lost my beloved wife Shannon in a war manufactured by Israel, I cannot support sending the next generation off to fight and die in a war that serves no benefit to the American people nor justifies the cost of American lives. I pray that you will reflect upon what we are doing in Iran and who we are doing it for. The time for bold action is now. You can reverse course and chart a new path for our nation, or you can allow us to slip further toward decline and chaos. You hold the cards. He signs it off with, "It was an honor to serve in your administration and to serve our great nation." I want to remind everybody as you hear that, and you may well have seen it but just not read the entire thing, like he outlines in this is a man who deployed to combat 11 times. He lost his wife. He is a Gold Star husband. His wife died in the war on terror. There have been many people who have been very quick to call him a traitor, to call him a coward. I've seen multiple people, some whom I generally respect, who are calling this man a coward. I would be very careful as you walk that ground. I would be very cautious. This is a man who has served our country, who has buried his wife as a result of the war on terror. I would say if there is anybody who gets a say on what's happening right now, it is this man. Okay, you don't have to agree with him. Listen, I heard somebody say this. I wish I could remember who, because I'd love to give them credit, but they said, you can agree with the war in Iran and still be good faith. You can be a genuine human being. You can be a patriot who loves your country. I don't dispute that. I think you can see the evidence in front of you for whatever reason. You may have a differing opinion than I do. You can still be a patriot who loves your country. You can be against the war in Iran and be a patriot who loves your country. Just because you're against the war doesn't mean you have some beef with our nation. Certainly not. I think, in fact, most people who are against the war in Iran would share many of Joe Kent's concerns here and say we don't want more people to have to bury their children, bury their brothers, bury their husbands, bury their wives in war on the other side of the planet. So it's not because people, who are against the war, it's not because they have some sort of an issue where they're not patriotic Americans. You can be, I believe this is true, you can be a patriot and end up on either side of this issue if you arrived there in good faith. Now, we outlined last week and the week prior, I've had a very clear and documented thought progress as we go through this. And by the way, I am open to having my mind changed on the situation in Iran. I have genuinely pursued in good faith the truth in this case. As I continue to research it, I am more in the camp of the anti-war. I established that last week. I am more anti-war this week than I was the week prior. I don't know how much more anti-war I could get. I'm about at my ceiling whenever it comes to this. Though I'm also I'm not saying I couldn't be walked back from that. If somebody can come to me and give me a very compelling case as to why the United States really needs to be doing this, and I think that the onus for that, by the way, is on the administration. For those of us who are concerned with the path that we are going, we have laid out our concerns. We've laid out our grievances. I think the last 20 years in the Middle East kind of speaks for itself. Regime change, all of this stuff. We don't have the best track record. And many of us are sick and tired of it. Many of us don't want to see our friends, sons, daughters, father, whatever. We don't want to see them coming back missing limbs or coming back draped in a flag in a casket, okay? Many of us don't want to see that anymore. There are those who are happy to be the global police. There are those who see things differently, maybe a little bit of a Cold War mentality that we have to be involved in. If it's not us, then who will? Kind of protecting the global hegemon status. There can be a wide array of views here, but it's the onus for easing the concerns of the nation that does not rest upon those who are worried with good faith, genuine. 99% of people who are against the war in Iran are not coming to this from some position. They're being slandered as like anti-Semites, or they're being slandered as unpatriotic, evil people. That couldn't be further from the truth. Certainly that's not true of me or anybody else I know who's deeply concerned and against the war in Iran. We're coming to this with an observation of the last 20 years. We're coming to this and saying we have not yet seen even so much as clear terms of victory. I was asking somebody this, again, in a good faith conversation. I was asking somebody who's a very adamant supporter of the war. I said, under what circumstances do we declare victory? Because that's one of the important prerequisites. Before you take action, we need to know what the finish line even is. We, the American people, have not been given that luxury. President Trump went and gave the longest State of the Union speech we have ever seen in the history of this nation, barely touching on Iran at all. He didn't explain to the American people, though he had the opportunity to do so. He did not explain to the American people what we were doing or why. He could have laid out his case. He could have said, without divulging classified information, he could have said, this is the real, credible, tangible threat, and this is why it's different than last time. Surely we've not forgotten all of the other times we've gone into the Middle East. Weapons of mass destruction. Let's go in and let's get them. Turns out those weapons weren't real. The intel was bad. The American people have understandably a bad taste in their mouth when we're told, hey, we have this intelligence that tells us there's some imminent threat. Okay, fill us in. We deserve to know. We deserve to get a little bit of information, and it's not on us to go and sift out this classified intel. It's on the administration to give us something. Tell us what the terms of victory are. Tell us why it's different this time. Tell us, you don't have to tell us your battle plans, and you don't have to divulge classified or sensitive information, but give us something to work off of. Thus far, we've not had anything. Getting back now to what we were talking about with Joe Kent's resignation. He came out and he very clearly says that with his position, with everything that he knew, he did not believe that Iran possessed a legitimate, immediate threat to the United States, that this was a preemptive attack. We've had so many conflicting explanations as to why we went into Iran. First, we were told by Marco Rubio that the justification was, and I think he has a certain level of credibility as he's speaking as the Secretary of State, he said that we had to attack because Israel was going to attack Iran preemptively, and that if Israel attacked Iran, Iran would retaliate and it would attack our military bases in the region, potentially killing. They had a lot of missiles, and so the justification first laid out by Rubio was that we had to preempt an Israeli preemptive attack. Now it has changed. Now we're being told, actually, Trump came out directly contradicting Rubio. Trump came out and said, no, actually, we probably forced Israel's hand by attacking first. Those two statements cannot simultaneously be true. So anyways, Kent has seen this and he looks at it and he says, no, I'm not seeing a threat. Tulsi Gabbard just went and she spoke under oath to Congress today and they pressed her hard. To their credit, I don't give flowers very often to people on the other side of the aisle. I wish the question came from a Republican, frankly. But there was a guy who is really kind of laying into her in the Senate. And he was asking her, was there, you as the director of national intelligence, you gather this intel and you deliver it. You make an assessment of the intel. Had Iran resumed their nuclear program? Were they in the process of building a nuclear bomb? She said no. They asked her, okay, was Operation Midnight Hammer, when we flew the B-2s and blew up their facilities, was that a success? Did we cripple their program? And she said yes. So nothing had changed. We had successfully blown up their facilities. This is the director of national intelligence testifying before Congress and saying, without saying the words, she is saying essentially, and this is why they pressed her, they pressed her so hard, was because they wanted to get her to just say a simple yes or no, but she can't. She does not have, in her position, if she wants to stay in that position, she does not have the luxury to counter-signal directly. She cannot directly counter-signal the President of the United States. If she does so, she's out of the room. And listen, I can fully respect and understand why Tulsi Gabbard, who I believe is against the war in Iran, she's always been against the war in Iran. She has a very well-established track record of saying no war in Iran. If she directly counter-signaled before Congress the President of the United States and said, no, actually it is my assessment as the DNI that there was not an imminent threat. If she says those words directly, she's out tomorrow. And all of a sudden, the only anti-war voice in the room is gone. Okay, or maybe there's another one. JD, I believe, to be against the war. You have two, potentially. We'll get into that in a minute. I believe there's two voices who have said a lot of stuff without directly saying it. The first one is obviously DNI Tulsi Gabbard. Tulsi Gabbard, being pressed on this, she said without saying, it was her assessment, that no, as a matter of fact, Iran had not resumed things. Iran was not, there was no big change. They weren't minutes away. We've heard this so many times. She testified that Iran did not try to rebuild their enrichment capacity. Following the June 2025 attacks, Operation Midnight Hammer, Iran did not resume enrichment. Okay, and we've been told for 20 years. You can go back in time 20 years and find article after article after article of whether it's an American intel official, whether it's an Israeli prime minister. You can find example after example, dozens in a very short period of time, where we have been told Iran is just weeks away. I mean, this has been like a running joke for 10 years. Iran is just weeks away from having 15 nuclear. You know, they have enough material for 11 bombs or 10 bombs or 5 or 15 bombs. I mean, it's always something else. We're always 10 minutes away, guys. We have to strike now. And Israel has been exerting pressure as an ally in the region, maybe nominally an ally in the region. They've been exerting pressure, trying to get the United States to blow up Iran. It's in their favor. Right? You can come to this from any direction that you want, but if you're being genuinely good faith and honest, you have to accept Israel would love nothing more than the United States blowing up Iran on their behalf. Israel is a much smaller nation. Iran has 90 million people. Israel does have nuclear bombs, but obviously it wouldn't be good for public perception to use those nuclear bombs, though I wouldn't put it past them necessarily. Israel would love to have the United States come in like a big brother and destroy Iran for them. So of course it's in their best interest. I don't even blame them for it. Like, I don't say this as if, oh, could you believe the audacity of the Israeli government to try and get the United States to do something? We should do that more often. We should try and get other people to do what we don't want to do. Trump does do that, okay? So I have no issue with Israel being Israel first, or them being nationalist, or them trying to use the United States to go do it. We just have to be conscious of it and not say, oh, we're going to send our sons and daughters to go die on the other side of the planet in a war that we don't need to be in because an ally in the region told us to. We have had this pressure for decades now of people saying Iran is on the verge of a nuclear bomb. Iran is on the verge of a nuclear bomb. Tulsi Gabbard testified today that Iran did not even try to rebuild their capacity. We had just blown them up. We were told it was successful, right? So we had, before this testimony, we had the question either, was Operation Midnight Hammer not successful? Or was it successful? Because if it was successful, there's really no imminent threat. What is the imminent threat? We had destroyed their ability to produce nuclear bombs. We were told it put them back years and years and years, like 10, 15, 20 years, potentially. We had pushed back their capacity to enrich beyond like 60 or 65%. That was not going to happen for a long time. We had decimated them. We heard all of the talking points. Okay, so if that's all true, there is no imminent threat. Tulsi Gabbard told us today that that was true. We did successfully. Operation Midnight Hammer was a resounding success. We blew them up and crippled their ability to come after us in any imminent fashion. A preemptive strike, in order to be justified, there has to be an imminent danger. We can't just say, oh, hey, I had somebody say this to me the other day. Well, don't you know Iran presents a threat to the United States? Yes, of course it does. It's the #1 state sponsor of terrorism. I have no sympathy. I should probably restate that about 1,000 times throughout this program. I have no sympathy for Iran. In case anybody's new around here, I don't like radical Islam. It's completely incompatible with the West. That doesn't mean we just go to war with everybody who disagrees with us. Well, didn't you know they call us the big Satan? Yes. Didn't you know that they had our hostages? Yes, of course. Absolutely, but we're talking about right now, today. Did they pose an imminent threat to the United States? The answer, seemingly, based on the testimony of Tulsi Gabbard, based on the testimony of Joe Kent, the answer seemingly is no. They did not present a real imminent threat to the United States. There are other nations that present us threats. China, Pakistan has nuclear bombs, for goodness sake. North Korea has nuclear bombs. We have all sorts of adversaries in every corner of the earth that all present some level of a threat, unless there is reason to believe that there is an imminent threat, like they're going to bomb us, they're going to blow us up, kill 1,000 Americans or something like that. We have no business. Why would we be going and preemptively, if that's the standard, my goodness, we're going way into neocon warmonger territory. If we just blow up anybody who presents us any level of a threat? No, it has to be that there is an imminent threat. There is an imminent danger to the United States. If those circumstances are met, then okay. That's another conversation for another day. But again, we haven't had the luxury of the administration explaining to us much of anything. And I know at the end of last segment, we were talking about how, Trump has not showed his hands. And that's going to be the response from people. They're going to say, well, Trump never tells anybody. And I understand that. I appreciate that. And I've supported it throughout the years. On the record, I have supported it publicly many, many times. I don't believe that you should go tell your enemy. Like Obama used to do this all the time. Well, if we're going to do this on this day at this time. Yeah, that's dumb. Like that's just actually dumb to do something like that. So I'm not saying that you have to give the exact specifics, this, we're going to do that. I'm just saying you got to give us something more than, well, they were a threat, and if we didn't do it, then maybe they were going to do something. No, man, that doesn't qualify. That's no different than what Bush did. That's no different than what got us into all of these never-ending wars in the first place. We have no reason to accept that. Before we move on now from the topic of Joe Kent, I want to circle back and address a little bit of the administration's response, which I do believe to be somewhat telling. Insofar as President Trump was asked about the very high profile, again, it's about 100 million views on Joe Kent's post on Twitter, shared way more than that in total, I'm sure, between the screenshots, etc. So it's a big story. Somebody asks President Trump, and they say, hey, what do you make of Joe Kent resigning, saying that we did this war on behalf of Israel, that there was no imminent threat, that we shouldn't have done it? Well, Trump replies, and he basically says, well, Joe was a nice enough guy. I never knew him all that well, but I always knew that he was weak on security. This is what President Trump said. I don't know if he remembers, but President Trump nominated Joe Kent. He's your guy. You picked him. You placed him in that office. What do you mean? He's always been weak on security. That's not an indictment just on Joe, Mr. President. That is an indictment on you. You cannot pick the man and then tell us, oh, you always knew he was weak. Why didn't you fire him? Why would you want him to be in such an important position? Counterterrorism, if you thought he was weak on security. That's kind of the name of the game. It's like the whole position. It's the entire reason that he would be there. I mean, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. This attempt to burn Joe Kent at the stake, the second that he came out and opposed this war, I knew for a fact, suddenly they're going to come after this man. They're going to do everything that they can to burn him down, which, by the way, I'm going to offend people with this line, but it is true. That is the behavior of a cult. You ever known anyone who left a cult? You know how nasty it is when you leave? You get excommunicated, burned at the stake. There's a witch hunt. A true witch hunt is formed to go after you. I'm not saying that's for a fact what's happening here with Joe Kent, but it seems everybody who has in any way questioned what the administration is doing is burned at the stake. Marjorie Taylor Greene, and maybe there's some reasoning for that. Maybe it had to do with the gubernatorial race. Okay, maybe Marjorie was very loyal to the president for a very long time. MAGA, America First, since the very beginning. I don't know why the president would be so mean to Marjorie Taylor Greene all of a sudden. But he's turned his back on her. He's turned his back on Tucker Carlson, saying Tucker Carlson's not smart enough, which is really weird. Tucker has been MAGA since day one. He's turned his back on a whole host of people. He's now appointed Mark Levin as the flag bearer of MAGA. My goodness, if Mark Levin is our chief guy, if Mark Levin is the one who's the exemplar of our team, I don't want to be on that team. He said, by the way, Trump excommunicated everybody who didn't want to move on from the Epstein files. He said, you're stupid. He literally said you are stupid, and he doesn't want your support, which is where initially that's where I got off. I was disowned because I'm not moving on from the Epstein situation. So I guess I got disowned after being an original 2016 Trump supporter who's poured thousands of hours into his respective campaigns. That's fine. Whatever. It is what it is. Now with the Iran thing, now it's if you even question, if you attack Mark Levin as if Mark Levin is some sort of a deity, who even listen, I won't get into that. Mark Levin was a never Trumper. He had published articles in 2016 about how he would literally never vote for you. All of the people who are the biggest cheerleaders for the Trump administration right now are the very people in 2016 who did everything in their power to kill him. And the people from 2016 who did everything in their power to support President Trump, and by the way, I say kill, like kill his career politically, not like literally assassinate him. That was a different group of people. But it was the very people in 2016 who demanded, they were never Trump people. They were all the way against him. They're now his biggest celebrators and cheerleaders. Lindsey Graham couldn't be happier with what the administration is doing. Lindsey Graham's never seen a war he didn't want to send your son to die in. What the heck is going on there with Lindsey Graham? You're endorsing Lindsey Graham and Mitch McConnell and maybe John Cornyn, God forbid. You're burning Tucker and Marjorie Taylor Greene at the stake? Joe Kent, a man who was deployed to combat 11 times, whose wife died in the war on terror, and you're saying that this dude is weak on security, the same guy that you picked? If you can't tell, I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it, not at all. And so now they're What an inversion, man. I just don't understand. I don't understand what's happening. I think that much of President Trump's victories, I think, were owed to Charlie Kirk. That's a bit of a running theory as of right now, holding together a very diverse and vast coalition. By the way, despite what anybody might want to try and tell you, Charlie Kirk was against the war in Iran. And he was correct. Charlie was vehemently against the war in Iran. Joe Kent actually said the last thing that he spoke, when he spoke to Charlie Kirk, the last thing that Charlie said to Joe Kent was, Joe, keep us out of war with Iran. Charlie was not in favor of a war in Iran. But anyway, now we have this piece of information. Apparently, this entire time, Joe Kent was actually, this is what they've done to him. They burned him. This guy is a combat hero who lost his wife. Brave guy. He's being called a coward. Now we're being told that Joe Kent was actually a leaker, that Joe Kent was the mole. Joe Kent was leaking classified information. He was spilling the beans to everybody in a way that he shouldn't have been doing. Oh, there's been an investigation. Is it possible? Yeah, I guess it's possible. It begs a couple of questions, like, why wasn't he fired? Why? What do you mean? This whole time you've just known he was under investigation as being some sort of a leaker, and you waited to tell us until he himself resigned in protest? You didn't have an issue with him being a leaker until he had an issue with you sending our sons to go die in Iran? Again, unless maybe it's not very clear just yet, I'm not buying it. I'm not buying any of this. I suppose it's possible. People are always going to have a question mark about it, though, because now it's stained. You let the move order be wrong. Like if this was a game of chess, sometimes the order in which you make the moves matters a lot. This is one of those things where you can't wait until the guy issues a protest resignation to suddenly tell everybody he's actually been weak this entire time. He's actually been a leaker this entire time. This is a character assassination against a man who's deployed to combat 11 times. And that's not to say it makes him untouchable. There's certainly people who have done great things in one aspect of their life but are completely incorrect in others. That does happen. But I think the guy deserves a little bit more respect than what some people are giving. I also want to mention, I teased up that I think Tulsi Gabbard is obviously against the war in Iran, saying what she's allowed to say. I'm not one to generally like to read between the lines of what people are saying, but in circumstances such as that of Tulsi Gabbard's, you do give a certain level of understanding to the situation that she is in. And I would wager what she is doing is trying to stay in her position. She does have some level of influence, and she's going to have to do an internal calculation and decide, is her influence better used in the administration, or would it do more good to leave? And maybe the idea is, I don't know, maybe it would do more for Tulsi to resign in a very similar way to what Joe Kent did. But as of right now, she has not yet made that decision. She said that this is she delivered the intel, which we talked about previous. She delivered the intel, which said that Iran has not tried to rebuild in enrichment capacity following the attacks of Operation Midnight Hammer. It seems to be that she said, without saying in many more words, that no, there was not an imminent threat. She's testifying this before Congress. So she is a voice, I would say, internally against the war. She does not have the luxury of publicly counter-signaling. She doesn't have the luxury of publicly saying, no, actually, I'm against the war. Because as soon as she does that, you just have to understand she's out. She serves, at the will of the president, and you don't get to, that's just simply not going to happen. The other individual who is very relevant in this conversation that I believe to be against the war in Iran, and I don't even think that that's like speculative. I think that Trump basically came out and said it himself, is J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance, Trump was asked about their position. J.D. Vance has been asked about his how those two are getting along with it. J.D. Vance's answer, again, is incredibly telling. If you listen to what he's saying, they ask, what are your thoughts on the war? Are you in favor of the war? You spoke out against the war in Iran many times. And J.D. Vance's response is, you're trying to drive a wedge between myself and the president. We can have internal discussions. I'm going to keep the trusted deliberations between the administration confidential so that people know I'm not just going to go and spill the beans or whatever, which is very respectable. It's the correct thing to do in that position. He says, but you're trying to drive a wedge between us, which means if JD gave his honest answer about his belief on the war, it would drive a public wedge between him and the president. That is a de facto, not even a de facto, it's just a direct admission that JD does not see this the same way that President Trump does. And President Trump reinforced that because previously President Trump was asked about JD and said, well, JD has a different philosophy than me on this. But, and here's what I would say JD is very clear about, is he disagrees on this, but when you're the vice president of the United States and the order comes down, your job is to express, this is my thought, this is what I believe is the correct answer. But once the order is given, once it is decided, the time for deliberation is over. It's time to execute. The worst thing from JD in his position, the worst thing that he could do right now is to publicly start counter-signaling. That would be horrible. And so we don't even have time to go into all of the reasons that it would be really, really bad to have the vice president of the United States publicly condemning a war that the president had gotten them into. But JD's in a really bad place because he wants to run in 2028, and I think he understands just how bad this war in Iran is and that he's going to inherit it. So he's trying to be very quiet. He's not going out and stumping for the war. I mean, think about this. He's not publicly going around and regurgitating what Trump is saying. He's not saying, I love the war, this is what we need to do. He's saying that the president has made his decision. It's my job to help execute it. That is what he is supposed to do. Whether he disagrees with it or not, that's the territory of the position, okay? That is what now that we're in, and listen, that's what I've said since the very beginning. Now that we're in, I want us to be successful. I pray for the success, the safety of everybody involved in this. I pray for President Trump every single day, hoping that this works out, that there was a 6D chess plan, and that I just wasn't privy to it. And one day all of the plan trusters are going to laugh at me, and I'm going to go, oh yeah, I was a panic, and I can't believe I didn't see the master plan that wasn't laid out in front of me. But JD is not stumping for this war. And sometimes not saying something is saying a lot. And I would say that that's the case for him and Tulsi Gabbard, that they have been previously very outspoken on their position surrounding the war in Iran, and now they're quiet, they're silenced, they're distance from the entire thing. Yeah, it tells you an awful lot. It tells you that there is a level of division, and in the case of JD, he can't be removed from the office, but he does have to be smart. He's in a position with a lot of responsibility. Tulsi, if she's very public and starts to counter-signal, she's going to be removed from that position. And then maybe it'll be revealed that Tulsi was also under investigation the entire time. She was actually a leaker or something. Oh, by the way, there's talk that Tucker might be under some form of an investigation. I'm not exactly sure what that would entail, what that would look like. But I just cannot. I agree with Joe Kent. I cannot see how this is in the interest of the United States of America. I don't see an off-ramp. We talked about this last week, but it becomes more true by the day. We're spending billions and billions, like $1 billion a day. We're spending billions of dollars fighting this war. The American people have not been given clear objectives. We have not been given a clear list of conditions for victory. We don't know if we're there for regime change or just to cripple them, or, we keep being told that we're not going to kick the can down the road. Okay, that's a good talking point, and potentially could have merit. We've heard short-term pain, long-term gain. Okay, but what does that actually mean? What do you mean when you tell me my gas prices just went up $1.25? What is the gain? When do we start getting the gain, and what does that actually look like? Because according to our intel right now, Iran did not pose an imminent threat. They did not have the enriched uranium. They weren't about to make a missile and blow us up. We've not been told that. I mean, we've heard, well, they were going to attack and they were going to do. What do you mean exactly by that? Because it seems maybe there's going to be a regional conflict between Iran and Israel. That is what it seems like. And by the way, no, it's not freaking anti-Semitic, okay? There are anti-Semitic people out there. Yeah, that does exist. There are actually racist people out there. There are actually wicked, bad. Yeah, those do exist. But it is not anti-Semitic to question the relationship that we have with a foreign country, okay? It doesn't make you a bad person. It doesn't make you, for goodness sakes, it doesn't make you a Jew hater. And I see decent, good, honorable, patriotic young people who are just raising good faith, honest questions. That doesn't mean everybody fits that category, okay? But there are a lot of people who are being painted over with a very broad brush right now for asking genuine good faith questions about their country. You can love your country deeply, sincerely, with everything that you have, you can love your country and your countrymen. You can genuinely not want people to fight and die in endless, forever foreign wars on the other side of the planet. You can question all of our engagement. Everything that we do is the United States. You have a right to question it. You have the right to say, what the heck are we doing with our relationship regarding Canada? Why are we so involved with Canada or Saudi Arabia or Britain? Any country on the face of the earth. If I was to go on a show and I was to spend a week or so ranting about Qatar or ranting about, I don't know, South Korea. Let's say I pick South Korea and I say, we're protecting South Korea, because we are. Without the United States, we have the demilitarized zone between North and South Korea. If the United States just pulled out completely, North Korea would probably just invade South Korea. They would just take them all over. The United States is spending money to do all this stuff. If I went on a long-winded investigative journey into the relationship between the United States and South Korea, and I said, hang on, I've just noticed that there's a bunch of people lobbying on behalf of South Korea in the best interest of South Korea. Maybe they were American citizens who are lobbying, maybe they were formerly South Korean, they have South Korean heritage or something, and they're lobbying on behalf of South Korea to the tune of millions and millions of dollars, and this money is potentially becoming influential in American politics, resulting in American foreign policy changes, resulting potentially in wars on behalf of, South Korea or something like that. If I was to start digging into this and uncovering and peeling back layers and things that were very interesting about America's relationship with South Korea, I could do that until I was blue in the face and nobody would ever call me racist against the South Koreans. Yet I am seeing before my very eyes good, decent, well-meaning, honest Americans who are being called racist and anti-Semitic. I mean, this is stuff that is directly out of the left-wing cancel culture playbook back in 2015, where everybody who disagreed with Hillary Clinton was a racist. Everybody who disagreed with what BLM was doing, burning down cities, was a racist. Everybody who disagreed with the trans this or the gay that, you were some sort of a respective phobe. You were some sort of an evil, awful person. That is what the left has done for decades. And I'm noticing in a very bizarre way, I'm noticing that this is happening on the right as it relates to things that are building up toward we are at war in the Middle East. This is completely fair game for people to have genuine, honest, decent questions about what the heck is going on with American foreign policy. What is going on with our money? What is going on with these wars? Why did we have a United States Senator, Senator Lindsey Graham, traveling to Israel and trying to coach the Israelis on what they can say and do to convince our president to get involved in a war on the other side of the world? Why would a United States Senator be doing that? That smells an awful lot like treason to me. But if you say something like that, you might have Mark Levin crash out on the timeline and decide that you've been labeled as some sort of a horrible anti-Semite. What the heck is even going on right now? The right wing has a curse, and I've talked about this before. I mentioned it probably a year and a half ago now, and I mentioned it hoping that I would be wrong, but trying to maybe preempt it a little bit. Historically, Republicans are great in opposition. We get into power and we start shooting each other in the head. What are we doing right now? We're shooting each other in the head. I wish there would be a few more olive branches extended with people. You may love the war in Iran, and there are people whom I love personally and I deeply respect the opinions of who view the war in Iran completely different than me. And that is totally fine. Now, I disagree with you, but it's fine in the sense that I'm not going to think that you're like an evil human being for that. I might think that you're wrong, right? We can have a debate on it. We can have a good faith conversation. Maybe you'll convince me. I am literally, genuinely, you don't have to believe it, I am genuinely open to having my mind changed on this. I've admitted a million times foreign policy is not the thing that is my foremost interest. This isn't the thing that I study to the degree that I study other topics. I've said that for years. So I am actually open-minded to somebody coming in and saying, hey, wait, Here's the way that I see this, and maybe you'll change my mind. I've had some of these conversations, actually. I've been, going and discussing this with other people. I've yet to have anybody make me feel any better about the war in Iran, but you can have a totally different position. I will extend an olive branch to you, and I will assume in good faith that you are somebody who is on my side on 80, 90, 95% of all of the issues that we face right now. I'll extend an olive branch and I'll say, you probably aren't just some like hateful religious wacko or like some lunatic person. You probably have some level of decent backing for what you're saying. You might really sincerely, genuinely believe, and again, you might well be right. I would never assign the worst possible motive to people who are nominally on my side, but it seems that perhaps that olive branch is only willing to be extended by a select few and really only in one direction. I have seen so many people slandered in the last couple of days. I have seen accusations, like I say, against very good and decent people. By the way, there's been a lot of news that has gone kind of gone to the wayside. We didn't really even get to touch on anything else. Today's episode has been kind of a rarity in the world of the Victor Nieves show. We don't do this very often. But as I look at the climate around us, man, I am deeply concerned. I'm deeply disappointed. And there's a lot of young people who share my sentiment. And it's a weird observation that I've noticed over the years, and I've mentioned it several times. But it used to be throughout history that it was the young men clamoring for war. They were full of testosterone, full of zeal and ignorance, right? They were dumb. I can't wait. I can't wait to go to war. And it was the older men who would temper them. And the older men would say, hang on, gentlemen, let's not do that. You've not seen what war looks like. You've not seen the things that I have seen. And that was the position that traditionally came with age, because with age ought to come wisdom. And it used to be that there was a lot of prudence. There was a lot of wisdom that was on display. Oftentimes it was senators, it was businessmen, something of like the aristocratic class that would tell the 20-year-old guys, hey, chill out. We don't want to be going to war. Now it seems that it has flipped. We have, like Lindsey Graham is one of the quintessential examples of this. He's a man who has no spouse. He has no kids. He has no posterity. He just has this weird bloodlust, or at least what is coming across in the public perception as bloodlust. He would love us to go to war. He would love us to push further. He would love us to continue. It's like the Ukraine situation. He loved Ukraine. He would fly over to Zelensky every chance that he possibly could get, and he would try and write more checks. And by the way, we're getting reports that they just asked for $200 billion to fight the war in Iran. Seems like we're going to be there for a little while. Seems like this is not going to be some quick operation. Unfortunately, we're in a position where we can't leave now. The mission has not been accomplished. So what are we going to do? And by the way, does it require boots on the ground? I mean, as we talk about Lindsey Graham and his desire to continue getting us involved, I'm sure Lindsey Graham would love to see boots on the ground. And it used to be that if you did public polling, nobody supported the war in Iran. Trump has moved some of that a little bit. But it still is true that virtually nobody supports boots on the ground. We've sent about 2,500 Marines in I think they call it an expeditionary unit. We've sent Marines down into the Middle East now. So we're not at boots on the ground just yet in a real material way, but we're not far from it. And if you look at what are the potential terms of victory, the closest thing that we've got as an explanation is Trump told us the Iranians had to offer the current regime, which, by the way, is not being toppled by the people. I don't know if that was a miscalculation. Everybody thought the Iranian people were going to rise up and seize control of their government. Yeah, that didn't happen. So what is our terms of victory? The closest we have is President Trump said that Iran had to offer their complete and total unconditional surrender. Well, the last time, ladies and gentlemen, that we got unconditional surrender from an adversary, you know what we had to do to them? We had to drop 2 freaking nuclear bombs on them. We had to bomb Hiroshima and Nagasaki, killing hundreds of thousands of people. Women, children, newborn babies, those in the hospital, elderly, infants, Christian churches, all blown up. I'm not disputing whether or not we should have dropped the bombs. That's a conversation for another day. But the last time we got total unconditional surrender, we dropped nuclear bombs on people. Since then, have we gotten it in Korea, Vietnam? When's the last time we got total, true, unconditional surrender? We don't have a great track record with that. And I would assume, that's what Trump said, I would assume that requires boots on the ground. And reported $200 billion request in funding, that sounds like boots on the ground to me. Keep our country in your prayers. Keep our men and women in our prayers. Please keep me and my family in your prayers, excuse me. I'll keep you in mind. Till next time, God bless.